to be able to train jiu-jitsu and to get to, combat each other in a safe environment. So it is pretty rare that you get somewhere that you can practice your martial arts and your skills against each other in such a full tilt way. But sometimes accidents happen. And I want to address this video just to safety and how we can keep ourselves safe and how we can keep our opponents safe. Of course, our own safety is number one, and we got to watch out for ourselves. But also, if we injure those around us, then pretty soon that training room is going to be empty. And the more people we can get in there, the more different styles, bodies, levels that we can get, the more it's going to be a rich training environment. So, got to make sure that we keep each other safe, keep each other on the mats as well to be able to reap the benefits, all of the life-wide benefits that jiu-jitsu gives us. And so we have a responsibility to our training partners as well. And so we'll start with what we can do to keep ourselves safe. First thing would be to make sure that we're not giving up like lazy positioning. One of the first ways that we take damage really easily is just by being tired and giving up positioning and then getting ourselves crushed and taking more damage for longer than we need to. So that's something to watch out for. And oftentimes this begins with when you slack on your physical fitness, your strength and conditioning, then you're more likely to be giving up those positions earlier than you need to and spending longer getting crushed, or as they say, becoming a diamond. And so this is one way that you can save yourself a little bit of pain and extra recovery time. And then something else is just to be aware of, how you're placing yourself, how you're especially moving your head around in different positions. So one example is, somebody has you in a side control or kind of in a position where they might be stepping over you or kind of flying around. You got to watch out for knees and elbows flying around you. So this is something where you might be aware of moments where they're stepping over you. And this is definitely not a time that you want to sit up and expose your head to be able to get clipped by a heel or a knee or an elbow. So just positioning. And that applies to the bottom, but equally to the top. When you're in a good position, same thing. You could be on the top of side control or something like that. And then somebody is trying to bring their leg back in, and especially if they're like a newer practitioner, my white belts. I wasn't trying to shout you guys out, but here we go, my white belts, and especially newer white belts, right? So they have that fight or flight response, and I won't say they, because we're all one, we're all we, and sometimes it happens at higher levels too, right? So you get into that tunnel vision and you start to get deep into your defense, and then you're trying to get out, so you throw a knee in or a leg. You're just trying to get your guard back, but it's not super technical, and then all of a sudden somebody gets hurt. So one thing I would say is to look out as the person on top. And then one thing I started to do over the years was to kind of put my one hand, let's say I got one arm on the cross face, I'll put one hand and stop their knee or their elbow, and even put a hand on that part of the body just to stop that from coming in. And this is also great self-defense training. So this tunes our mind to expect the unexpected and to expect those strikes, especially if somebody was to be throwing it intentionally, right? And something else to look out for too. So let's say to keep our opponent or our training partner safe as well. So we're moving on now from what to do to keep yourself safe. So in order to keep your training partner safe, just have that in priority, right? So one thing is to have a priority sequence, right? Winning is underneath safety, right? So in a self-defense situation on the street, and to some degree in competition, sure, you're going to put winning above everything. But on the training mat, you're among friends. We want to, again, keep the room full of people to train with. You want to put safety first. So if that means pausing for a moment, telling your partner stop in order to shift some part of the body, if it means tapping to something, just put that ego aside and put safety first. Then something else that I'm addressing with my students sometimes in a role, I see them cranking on something. It could be cranking on a foot, an ankle. It could be cranking on a choke. It's not quite there. It's a face crush. And I know there's this whole saying, of course, it's true to a degree, like everything under the nose is the neck. And yeah, of course, if you want to get the tap, sure, you can go across somebody's jaw or whatever and just crank it. But my question to somebody is, what technique are you specifically going for? Because if you're going full tilt at something and you can't tell me the type of technique that you're actually trying to accomplish there, chances are safety isn't your first priority in that scenario. So it means that there is some kind of skill gap and you need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what you're actually going for. There needs to be intentionality in the movement and in the application of technique. So that's another thing to keep in mind when we're trying to keep our partners safe. Now, the other thing is just to be aware of, of course, we can move quickly, we can change positioning quickly, but we want to avoid throwing our limbs around just willy-nilly. So one example I can think of here is, let's say that you're caught in an armbar. Yeah, you want to get out of that, but you're not just going to throw your leg over and you can't even see their face. So you're kind of guessing and you might hit somebody with your heel if you're just to throw your leg over. It's probably not going to get you out, right? So just keeping in mind that you might have to tap. You might have to apply a different escape, or you might have to go back and study the escape. Like once you get in it, it's not worth trying to fight or sacrifice your partner's safety because you didn't know the proper move. Like it's good to experiment and try things, but it's not really the time to guess when you're putting a flying limb near your opponent's face. And the other thing too is, positioning moves and that type of battles, scrambles, they can be very quick, high intensity. But one thing to do when you get to the point of a submission attack, so a submission attack is on, that's when everything should slow down. That's when you should amplify your awareness and your attention and really notice if your partner is tapping. Really notice if they're not tapping, if you feel that particular joint, if there's some crunching, or if it feels like you've met the end point of tension. And this is something which, you become more aware of over time and more in tune with the feeling of in the body when you're hitting an end point and they're not tapping. But this is something that you want to really pay attention to and slow down. Once you have the submission lock, there's only bad things that can happen from there when you progress. And so this is a time to check in if they're tapping, maybe tell them, especially if they're a newer rank, like, hey, you should probably tap here. Or you just, switch to something else, switch to another attack and consider it a win in your head. All right. So do you guys have any other tips for safety, how to keep yourself safe, how to keep your opponent safe? Feel free to share in the comments. And just one more thing that comes to mind. It's great to be able to roll with everybody. Sometimes you get to know that a certain person isn't safe to roll with. Part of the safety is being able to say no and being able to do it firmly, respectfully, but that also prevents you from getting into a situation where things might get out of hand, right? That's going to protect you in the long run. And that's it for now. Be safe out there. And yeah, keep training smart so that you can get all the benefits, and preserve your training partners so that they too can reap all the benefits that training has to offer. Because we're all in it for much more than the physical if you stick with it long enough.